Welcome to Life After the Fire, the preeminent podcast related to having a good life after the fire service. My name is Chris Phelps. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by a good friend of mine, Mark Wechsler.
How you doing?
All right, Mark. So Mark and I, a little history. Mark and I go back several years ago. We were on the same fire department together. We were on the pension board together, and that led to us developing a great relationship. And we both had within our passion to help our firefighters have a good pension, and that's obviously a cornerstone of having a life after the fire department. But along the way, we might have had a little fun with it. Would you say?
Just a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it was like a Bert Kreischer thing. I mean, we hired some Hooters waitresses. I don't know if you call it, we hijacked a cigarette boat, but
Boca Raton.
Yeah, we definitely got ourselves onto a cigarette boat ride.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Right.
Caused some.
I mean, if you think about that, even hiring the waitress, and
we didn't actually hire Hooters. We just interviewed them for a job.
We interviewed them
at a Hooters that we had no affiliation with.
No, they weren't as aware that we had no affiliation.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were honestly seeking employment there.
They
just had no idea that we had no.
And we have no idea whether they actually got the employment.
Yeah, one could hope. Because they were definitely well qualified.
Sure. If I remember, at least one of them had experience of working up in the Cocoa Brevard area at another facility.
You remember more than me.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Obviously we've had a lot of fun together over the years, but we're both very similar in the respect of while we wanted to help provide a better life after the fire service for ourselves, we also try to do that for our fellow firefighters. And that's kind of the goal here today. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on board is because of what you've done with your career in the fire service and what you've done, more importantly, after the fire service. So give us a quick overview of where the fire service took you and where you are today.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, it seemed like the career time was brief in the whole big scheme of things. But as we were talking yesterday, it was just kind of one of those things where we're kind of all designed. I think we're all designed just to kind of look and see what's next, because of the benefit of some of the early retirement abilities of the fire service. And a lot of folks will leave one place and go on to the next, and within the fire service, and that's good. Not everybody does that. So it's just, and gosh, every single person, every retiree is a little bit different in what their plan is and next step plan is.
So knowing a little bit about your afterlife, so initially after the fire service, and it's your fault that I wound up as a fire chief, by the way, you know that.
I got to take some credit for that.
You can take all the credit for it. It's quite possibly the second biggest scam I ever pulled off in my entire life. But
I'm just, being a part of it.
So Mark had pursued a possible fire chief's position, but instead of that, you went off to went back to school like Rodney Dangerfield, the whole 9 yards there. And what did you wind up going to school for?
Well, and with that, I mean, about 3 to 4 years before I retired, we were on the pension board, and I found out because I was going to be pretty young retiring, I wanted to look at what was next, and I'd gotten all the educational requirements and degree for becoming a fire chief somewhere. And then our medical director, Dr. Todd Husty, had suggested that he was thinking about leaving the area and going to Steamboat, Colorado, and buying land up on the mountain as well as down in the valley, and opening up a clinic and having himself and a couple of physician assistants with him. And at that point, I thought, oh, that's kind of a cool angle also, being that I'm a paramedic and I kind of enjoy the medicine. And so I started looking into that. Well, come time for my retirement, I'd met all the requirements for fire chief, and was looking to get into a PA school somewhere, and was basically applying for both, and happened to interview. It was late on a February that I interviewed for University of Florida's PA program, which is just ridiculously tough to get into. But I went there and spent 2 days there interviewing, and was told after that, I was on a Thursday, I was told that it would be around early April and they would let me know. Well, during this whole time while I'm interviewing at different PA schools, I'm also going through processes for fire chief, one of which was for Ponce Inlet Fire Department. And at the time, it was just a single station, and I don't even know what it is right now, but they were looking to start a paramedic program. Their police, fire, and city hall were all in one building. And it was a great retirement job. It wasn't going to pay a whole lot. It was going to be, a good place to retire and, enjoy the benefits of it and still be a fire chief and build something. Well, the Friday morning after I got back from that interview at the University of Florida, the phone rang, and picked it up, and they said, "This is Ponce Inlet Fire, and we'd like to let you know that you placed first on our list for being fire chief." And I said, "Oh, wow," and that's great, and they said, I think, I can't remember, there were 6 or 8 other folks, and they didn't meet the same qualification. That's great. You beat those folks out. And they said, if you want, you can set up a time to come and talk to us at HR and, meet the city manager, all that. And they said, "Do you want to, make a decision now, or you want to think about it through the weekend?" I said, "Oh, let me think about it through the weekend." And knowing I'd been interviewing yesterday at University of Florida. And so hung up the phone, and I thought, wow, okay. And so I had to think about, well, what if I do get into one of the PA programs and start, I could always work there for 6 months, start a paramedic program, get it going, but that wouldn't be fair to them. It kept going back and forth. Well, the phone rang again, maybe 5 minutes later. And I picked up the phone, and figuring it was like HR or something from Ponce Inlet, and it was University of Florida. And they basically, "We'd like to offer you a position in our upcoming PA program."
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that close together.
It was like 5 minutes. It was just unbelievable. And what I said to them was, "You told me it was going to be April." And they said, "Well, yeah, we offer early entrance to 3 people. You're one of the 3 we're offering it to."
Wow. And
so I said, "Oh, wow." And they said, "Well, do you want to think about it through the weekend and give us?" I said, "No, I'm in." And it was one of those things where I realized that was what I really wanted to do, because I was able to make that decision that quickly.
Which was odd, because you weren't exactly known for being that great of a paramedic, from what I remember.
No, I was average at best. Yeah. I was,
best on a good day.
Right. That's why they promoted me to lieutenant, just to get me off the truck.
Exactly. Running through needles.
Right.
And Band-Aids, running out of Band-Aids.
Right.
Got to get Wechsler off the rescue.
We need more gauze. Somebody put some gauze on this guy. But no, it was just like, it was really kind of surprising. And I ended up calling Ponce Inlet back about an hour later. and said thanks, but no thanks. And I asked the question, who's number two on the list? And they said there wasn't a number two. There was only a number one. And they said, would you suggest anybody? And I must have sneezed or something and said Chris Phelps or something like that. And I said, they said, what about Chris Phelps? And I said, no, but somehow they ended up getting your number from me. So, and the rest is history.
Yeah, thank God it's history. But yeah, that was something. That was something. Great part of, great experience, and wouldn't trade it for the world. But
yeah, I mean, I figured no matter what, I knew I was going to learn something from it if I took the position. I wasn't sure how long I was going to stay. Some of the other opportunities that were out there for fire chief were pretty good. I interviewed in a place in Marble Falls, right near Marble Falls, Texas, and I remember interviewing with them. A nice department. It's a beautiful area, golf course all around. It was, and the actual Marble Falls, which was nearby. And when they were talking about the call load, and they gave me a sheet to read, and it had 11 different calls, and it was mostly mechanicals, and I think there was one medical call on there. And they said, how does that compare to where you're working now? And I said, yeah, I ran 11 calls my last shift. And they said, oh no, that was October. They were showing me the month of October that they had 11 calls. And so when they actually called and offered me the job too, but were quite clear that we have a concern that you might be bored with this and you might leave within a year. Please be honest with us. And I said I would be bored. I appreciate it, but so they were going to offer it to somebody from within.
So obviously the fire chief route wasn't for you. It could have been. I mean, you obviously would have been, been amazing at it, but for some odd reason you went the medical route, and how'd that go?
And it went well, and I personally, I joke about it, but I know that I achieved fire chief. The fact that I never started is another issue, but I made the successful achievement of getting at least offered the job, which is good. But but going on to PA school, it was pretty amazing. I walked in on the very first day, and knowing that I had a 4.0 average in my pre-med classes going in, and I got picked to be one of the 3 early, so I was fairly sure I was going to be valedictorian, and I was going to be offered a teaching position there before I left, and all this stuff, because I felt that confident. And the very first day, as they're introducing the class, they said, show of hands here, how many people in the room have had a 4.0 average coming into this? And every hand in the room went up. And I remember sitting back there looking around going, wow, I'm average. That's
once again,
it was pretty humbling, and it was tough. It was good, tough classes, and I enjoyed getting through it. I didn't make straight A's. I did really well, but not straight A's. And so it was good. And on the way out, I was lucky enough to swing back into Maitland Fire, and while they're having an EMS meeting with Dr. Husty, and at the time Todd Husty was offered a potential position with EMS medical direction with Seminole County, and offered me his assistant medical director job. Then I was about 3 months short of graduating. So
you went from being the lieutenant paramedic for the department and retiring out, and then coming back as an assistant medical director.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool now because, I train, almost weekly with a group of 30 or so medics, and I'm still allowed to ride the trucks with them and jump calls, and they give me a radio and a designation, and I'm still a part of it, and oddly enough, that matters. I mean,
Yeah.
and for those folks that have gone through it like we have, you never really want to let go completely.
Yeah.
You know.
I know. I felt the same way. When I left Maitland the second time in
Yeah, how many times
2011.
were you canned from there?
No, well, I guess twice. Just twice.
Okay.
There might have been another
Without
time
getting into
where
the
I
long
where I
story.
wrecked a fire truck, but somebody, a certain
You got a
lieutenant,
commendation for that.
wrote a very, very nice letter that instead of getting fired for wrecking a fire truck, I somehow got a commendation for it. So, yeah. But anyway, when I left Maitland the second time, leaving my career in the fire service, moving to Tennessee, so my wife could realize her dream of being a flight nurse with Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I was only off the job for not even a full month before I found out that where we were moving had a volunteer fire department, and I could just slide right into there as a volunteer firefighter. And man, it was something. But it kept me connected to the fire service.
Yeah.
And and while my my career at that point was now in the mortgage industry, I still kept that connection to the fire service. I still had that camaraderie. I still actually maintain contact with the guys and gals that I used to work with, but this was more closer to home, if you will.
Yeah.
And I probably took that for granted because it was such a short off time, if you will, just like a month. I mean, that's like a long vacation.
Yeah.
But now truly being totally out of the fire service for the last 4 or 5 years, I see that, wow, that was really a blessing. It allowed for a smoother transition out of the fire service, still having that connection. And while I still have relationships and various departments that I've worked, that not having that daily contact with the guys, surprisingly, was really something.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, did you keep your medic?
I kept it. So when I left Florida, I had to get my national registry, which I did. And then in Tennessee, it was just a first responder type fire department. So I didn't need to keep my medic. But what I did was, instead of doing the continuing education, which I was, well over at the time, what I opted to do was every time my license came up for renewal, I went and took the test again. So my thinking was, one, I don't want to have to do, I don't want to have to do continuing education anymore. Two was, hey, if I can still pass the test, then I guess I guess I'm legitimate. I can still perform, but I never had to perform
anymore. Yeah, it's interesting because right now as it is, my PA recertification is so much more than the paramedic is, and so right now what I do is basically all the same stuff with ACLS and PALS and all the rest of that stuff. I just simply transfer over and maintain my paramedic one also, and of course then they want a medical director. Well, I've got that, so it kind of worked out.
That's something.
But yeah, there's I've had some of the medics that I train with now have said, why do you keep it up? And I just said, I worked too hard for it way back when. I don't want to let it go.
Yeah.
God
forbid you ever had to go back to doing something, but that wouldn't happen.
Right. Exactly.
So you're kind of an anomaly, or as I think some other people have called you, a unicorn.
Unicorn.
Unicorn in where you have gone after the fire service and going into medicine. And I don't know any others that are even half a doctor like you are.
There's like
George Walls.
3/4
a doctor. What would you say? 3/4 a doctor?
No,
Half a doctor?
You know, when people say, "Well, I don't know about this. I'm not a doctor." I go, "Hey, neither am I." You know,
Imagine
I
that.
just do a little bit more than a Google search. That's all.
Yeah.
But yeah, George Rawls did it. I mean, he was what, Miami or Metro Dade,
Okay.
and then
I wasn't aware of that.
yeah, and went to medical school at University of Miami, and he's full doc, which is great. But he did school during the week and paid back time trades on the weekends.
Wow.
And when he first left the actual fire service was when he came up to ORMC for residency.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, I got all the respect in the world for George for doing that. But it's just not something that, I mean, I just, it was, like I said, it was a truly a moment decision, because I could have easily stayed and become fire chief. And um, I mean, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't been accepted at one of the PA schools.
Yeah.
I might have stayed with the fire service and been happy with that.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of one of those things where it just seemed to fit into that. Now, that being said, Todd Husty eventually did buy his place in Steamboat, um, and but at the same point, he didn't open up a clinic. So,
Gotcha. Well,
but yeah, it was kind of, it was a neat pathway. And though I guess I'm one of the rare folks that took it farther in medicine, um, I, I look back and still the fire service is the best time of work I've ever had.
right. So if you were to do it all over again, or if you were trying to advise our next generation of firefighters and paramedics, that maybe aspire to get their PA, or go on to medical school, what would be some advice you would give them today?
Um, I don't know. It was a good transition. It really was. If you enjoy medicine as a medic, then it's a great transition. I think in my PA school class, there was about six that were either EMTs or paramedics. About the same number of nurses also. And nurse practitioner is a lot easier to get into from being a nurse, and staying in the ER, which is kind of the way I did it. It just fit better. I do know a couple of folks who did, that kind of changeover and got into derm or did something else, or cardiothoracic surgery or something like that. But the ER seemed to be the most best appropriate fit for me when I got out. But it comes down to it kind of comes down to the love of medicine. Um, the fire service is not a bad place to grow and to become who you are, but at some point it does end, and part of that is age. And I've got some wonderful gray hair,
Gray hair, still
but
hair.
yeah, but right, good point. But but at the same point, I couldn't see myself being an older firefighter. It just didn't seem to fit that. Um, I just didn't see that as my path. And I think when we talked yesterday, I've always been one of those folks that once I get to a new level of education or rank, I always looked and thought, what's the next step? And sometimes that meant stepping down a little bit or sideways, but I always looked to see what was next. And including when I got to being a PA, I looked and considered medical school and considered that, but it's not cost effective. It's just not, and I get called doctor every time I work a shift. It just doesn't, it's not something I gotta be called doctor.
Right.
But it's a cool transition from the medic side. Um, it's I definitely recommend it if you're feeling that urge to go ahead and spend at least a couple more years in school. Um, it's it's not exactly for everybody, but I think it beats sitting on a porch.
Sure. And on the financial side of things, what did what do you think it cost you to get
Mhm.
your
Well,
degree and
to go wherever you want to go right now is going to cost probably somewhere around, on the cheap side, about $50,000 for a couple of years, a master's program, upwards of $150,000 depending on where you want to go. Um, I was lucky enough to get into University of Florida, which was a state school, and it was fairly cheap, and I was able to do it for probably somewhere in the 45, $50,000 range, um, most of which was covered either by savings or other things, and a brief student loan, but it was brief. They also offer programs when you get out, if you work in an underserved area, and I joke about it, but Sarasota is an underserved area.
hmm,
Where you work in there and you make the same money doing whatever you're doing for 2 years, and you get tuition forgiveness.
gotcha.
Um, and there's also the opportunity of stepping into the military if you want to do it that way, also, which will give you uh, tuition forgiveness, and you go in as an officer. So,
Interesting. So some of
yeah,
the barriers to entry into being a PA would, from a financial standpoint, you just mentioned things that, you know, counteract that, I guess you could say.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and I
Barrier
mean,
to
and you're
entry,
making
not thinking you're a good enough medic. Well, obviously, we've gotten past that.
right, yeah, or at least I give that impression. You know? But it's a um, there's there are barriers, but with any choice you make, there's going to be some level of barrier,
Yeah,
and there's ways around every one of those barriers.
yeah,
The money you make once you're a PA or a nurse practitioner um, is definitely better than what you would make as a medic. Um, but at the same point, once you make rank and do other things in some of these larger departments, you're going to make some significant amount of money. I haven't had to worry about that because of the direction I've gone, both with the ER level PA is paid better than the family practice PA. But I've also had an excellent gig with Todd Husty doing medical direction now for over 20 years. Uh, Believe it or not, it's like we're at that point where it's the same amount of years I had in the fire service as I've done in medical direction with him now.
that's
So
something. And I think
yeah, it's really cool because I've seen rookies go in and grow up in the Seminole County area, and now they're getting ready to retire. And I've watched them all the way through their early pup stages to now some of them are chiefs.
that's interesting. So,
Yeah,
and one of the things that we um, had talked a little bit about yesterday was how, you know, here you are, you've been now retired for what, 22, almost 23
yeah, almost 23
years,
years.
almost
Yeah,
23
June will be
years.
23.
And while that pension at the time seemed like, probably a significant amount of money, now 20 something years later, it it's not quite as big as it, or doesn't have
No,
as much of an impact in your finances like you thought
right,
it would.
and very few systems have colas. Also, I mean, if you're in a good private system, you might get a cola out of it. I know while we were on the pension board together, we were discussing colas as a possibility, and it wasn't a financial capable thing for us to do. But there are some systems that have that, but not very many. And so, yeah, no, when you're looking, uh, the fire service gives you that ability. I mean, I joke about it. I was 18 years old when I walked in and spoke to Julius Sassa
Yeah.
and said, I want to be a fireman. And he said, well, here's some gear. And he handed me a pager and a helmet and a coat
Yeah.
and said, just show up on these calls. And that was it. And he goes, you ought to go ahead and at some point go ahead and get your fire standards, and maybe some the EMT. A lot of folks are going into now. You might consider that.
Yeah.
But that was it. You tell that to the folks right now trying to get into the fire service, and it's kind of ridiculous. But I was 18, and so when with Maitland we had the 20 and out. Thankfully, I got on the pension board and lowered it from 20 out at age 45 to 20 and out. But I was 38 years old and eligible to retire.
Yeah.
You're not just that's not a point where you go and sit on a bench on in your front yard.
Right. Get you the fishing pole and
Yeah.
the motorhome. It's
Right.
a little early for that.
Yeah. So it was kind of one of those things where though I was kind of impressed at what I did, and people ask, how I knew what I wanted to do when I was 18 years old. No 18-year-old kid knows what they want to do the rest of their life. And I said I did. I joined the fire service to meet girls. I had no game. I looked like Horseshack.
Yeah.
And it just
I
ended
remember
up
those
being
pictures.
a wonderful path for me. And it didn't take me long to be doing this stuff and going, this is kind of cool. I think I like this, and wanting to go to that next step. The same thing like I even do today is, achieve it. What was it? The Massey's hierarchy of needs.
Uh-huh.
It's a good thing to study, but
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Is it Maslow's?
That's Maslow.
Okay. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But it was the very top one was self-actualization.
Yep.
And I kind of, get to that point where you recognize, okay, I am at the point where I am very comfortable with who I am and what I'm doing, and I would be comfortable training and showing somebody else how to do this. At that point, do you look to the next level? What's next?
Yeah.
Right now as it is, when I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, maybe I should look into how I can step away with a good financial plan.
Yeah.
Exactly. So but I think everybody has, you get those, rookies now starting, and they're looking at it going, I can't wait to work my next call, and yet there's, when you look at the rest of it, all the rest of, your life, when these folks are starting and they're 18 or 20 or 22 or whatever, they have no idea a lot of those decisions that have to be made. And some people are happy going through life as a firefighter, as an engineer, as as an EMT, not a medic. It doesn't. But more power to them. Everybody's different.
It's all good stuff. So I usually like to end these sessions with some sort of a call to action. So if somebody were interested in pursuing the route of going towards PA school or nurse practitioner school, what would you say would be their first step?
I would say look at your education, because any place that you want to go higher in medicine needs to have a good, strong pre-med requirement. So that's going to be your biologies and your chemistries and organic and microbiology and those kind of things. As you're going through there, you might find that it is exactly what you're looking for. And I mean, my stuff was tough, but at the same point, when I was able to get through them and get an A on there at the end of it, and then move on to the next one, it was one of those things where I recognized if I'm going to make a C, then I repeated at least once just to make sure I was going to get a better grade, because I didn't want the C to be a part of my future. So but it's got to be that commitment. I recently had a discussion with somebody that started into that whole plan, and they were actually going to go to med school and become a doctor, and got into it and realized they were enjoying the nursing level of it, and they were going to go through nursing school. And I said, perfect, enjoy nursing for a while. You might find that you want to go to that next step, but enjoy it and learn, and all the different levels that you get along the way can't hurt. I also worked part-time in the ER as a tech, because I wanted to see what life was like as a PA in the ER. just to see. And again, at the time, I wasn't even sure I was going into the ER when I got out of school, but early on, I was a tech at Florida Altamont for about 6 months. Good experience there too. Um, but yeah, I'm thinking that is a at least kind of jump into some level of medicine. Even if it's just the biology
So
classes.
dip your toes into the water and
Yeah,
see
yeah,
if you
and
really want to
it's
go
not
for
for everybody. And I can't, from the folks that are in the fire service considering this, enjoy what you're learning with patient assessment and patient interaction. When I went through school, there were so many people in that group that had no idea how to talk to a patient. And it's been probably the biggest plus I have found in all of my things that I've done is I get complimented all the times because patients report back that they were able to talk to me, and it's hard to explain why that's that important. But I have when I've got med students and residents that are shadowing me, I'll have them watch Doc Hollywood movie, Michael J. Fox. It's a great movie, and it goes into how he was going to go into plastics, leaving his residency in the ER, and was going to go into plastics, and then gets in this wreck along the way. It was filmed in Micanopy, just so you know, but he gets in this wreck along the way and learns what real medicine is about, which is about actually communicating with people and sometimes reading their mail, or if they pay you with a pig. But you could tell that is just such the coolest part about medicine is actually getting to know who your patient
getting
is.
that connection.
And I can tell you comfortably, and as you knew me as a medic, I wasn't that way as a medic.
Yeah.
One of the things that my wife was quite happy to bring up is that I had lost all empathy from being in the fire service. I could comfortably say I didn't care. I mean, it was like, it sucks that happened to you. I'm glad it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And it was a cold way of looking at it, but that was my way of getting through all the bad stuff.
Yeah. Separating yourself from it.
Yeah. So you've got to, once you get beyond that and actually learn how to talk to a patient and actually care about them, it's amazing the difference in medicine that you can do.
Cool stuff. Well, we'd love to hear feedback on what you think of the show and where we're taking it. We want to hear the good, bad, the ugly. So if you're listening to this on whatever platform you're listening to us on, drop a review. Send us a copy of that review or reach out to us at info@latfpodcast.com. That's latfpodcast.com. And we'll catch you on the next one. Take care.